Finally, joining us from Vancouver by Skype and bringing with her a beautiful background view of Vancouver at 7:15 on a Sunday morning is Linda Solomon Wood. Linda Solomon Wood is founder and editor-in-chief of National Observer, an online publication that focuses on climate, environment, and politics. National Observer launched last May. Its audience was 7 million in its first year. Linda previously founded the award-winning Vancouver Observer and served as its editor-in-chief. National Observer has been nominated this spring for 4 national awards by the Canadian Association of Journalists and the Canadian Journalism Foundation. Linda was the recipient last year of a Vancouver Board of Trade Award for Entrepreneurial Innovation. Her presentation today is titled Media Communication, Public Engagement, and Global Change, and begins with a short video, which I'd like to play for you now, and then we'll have Linda Solomon Wood join us.
I lead a team of award-winning reporters working across Canada.
The National Observer is an online outlet that focuses on energy, politics, and the environment, that has run a number of stories exposing the relationship between the oil industry and the media.
Journalism is crucial to democracy, but today, big media owners are cutting budgets for news at an alarming rate. And because of this, many unbelievably important stories are going untold.
Does the world care enough about climate change? No, the media doesn't pay enough attention. We get distracted by isolated, horrible events. But the largest threat to our future and our kids' future and our grandkids' future is the climate crisis.
That is why we at the National Observer are crowdfunding a special report on the race against climate change. With your support, we can afford to do a year of reporting on some of the most urgent stories of our time. There have been strong commitments from leaders.
We are the first generation to feel the impact of climate change and the last generation that can do something about it.
Our government is making climate change a top priority.
But how will they deliver on their promises?
We want to see that unequivocal support for pipeline infrastructure.
We know solutions exist and that the time is now. Back reports from the race against climate change with a pledge today.
And please join me now in welcoming Linda Solomon Wood.
Opportunity to be on this panel. Those were amazing talks that everyone did, and I hope to follow up with all of you. Those are incredible stories that the National Observer needs to be telling. And I'm glad to have a chance to say a few words about the relationship between media and global change, even at this early hour in Vancouver. I shared this video with you because I think it says more in 2 minutes than I can say in 10 about what we do at National Observer and why. It was part of a crowdfunding campaign that is over. I'm not fundraising from you, but it was made successful by 800 people from around the world. And I think they made it successful and contributed to it because they're asking the same questions. They feel they're urgent questions. How will world leaders make good on their promises about climate change? And they know that having a strong media there to help leaders be accountable is so important. So let me get right to the point. The media is absolutely fundamental to global change, and it's absolutely fundamental in helping the public come to terms with one of the greatest global predicaments, the predicament of climate change Journalism is absolutely fundamental to helping people in countries around the world deal with the ever-present question of what will become of us? What should we do? In Canada and around the world, it's our job to ask hard questions, questions people don't want to be asked often, questions governments don't want to be asked, and that corporations don't want to be asked. And it is our job to dig deeply into matters that are often taking place behind closed doors in secret, to be persistent, to sort through what really matters and what does not, so that the public can know. So, as a for instance, I'd like to introduce you this morning to the work of one of Canada's great environmental reporters. Probably many of you know his work already. And he is now the National Observer's managing editor, Mike D'Souza. Since joining the National Observer in January, Mike has examined thousands of pages of documents that he's obtained through Freedom of Information requests. Through days and months of poring over these pages, he's exposed a poorly functioning pipeline regulatory board, the NEB, which is overseeing some poorly functioning pipelines made by companies who are not, I'll let you fill in the blanks there. During the hottest year on the planet, a year which follows other hot years, although apparently not in Toronto. Did I get that it was snowing this morning? I want to tell you about a story of Mike's that we published last January, but that surfaced again this week. Scientists trace cancer-linked pollutant to oil sand stockpiles. Do we have the visuals on the screen? I'm going to assume I can't tell what's going on there, but I hope you can see the screenshots I did of Mike's work. So the story resurfaced last week on Reddit, and it went absolutely viral after not getting a lot of attention when we published it, because clearly people started to realize its ramifications in light of the Fort McMurray wildfires. The story begins with this paragraph: dust blown away from stockpiles left over after oil sands upgrading is very likely a key source of cancer-linked pollutant commonly found in the northern Alberta region. He cites a new peer-reviewed study from the Environmental Science and Technology Journal. And he says it is one of the first studies to pinpoint the source of significant amounts of cancer-linked polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons in the oil sands region. And the story ends with on a foreboding note, saying that wind can blow these cancer-causing stockpiles. And as we know, last week in the heart of the oil sands, the wind did blow. The winds came hard. Because of Mike's story, people knew something important, and they were alarmed at what might have been silent, under the radar, but an important health hazard to know about. Without reporters like Mike around the world researching, fact-checking, and communicating, we simply wouldn't know much that we need to know. And what we don't know really does hurt us. We've seen in the United States our colleagues at Inside Climate News use similar careful reporting carried out over many months to expose the fact that one of the biggest oil companies in the world knew years ago that their operations were helping to cause climate change. They knew, and meanwhile, they engaged in debunking the idea that climate change was real. They confused the public on purpose. Now there are efforts in the United States to punish this company and others like it. Their operations were carried out worldwide, adding to the global instability that we've heard spoken about so eloquently this morning. Yes, information is power. Information can lead to global change. And in order to solve our problems, we have to know what they are. We heard Jean speak about amplifying stories. That's exactly what media does. And we heard him say that leaders are more likely to do the right thing if they know that the public is behind them. That's our job, to inform the public so the public gets behind positive change. But what does the media do? Does it always amplify the right stories? Donald Trump or threats to public health? Donald Trump or corruption? Donald Trump or threats to the environment? Another story I'd like to tell you about Mike's work. Mike has been relentlessly reporting on, and nobody else will, because it's just not a sexy story, not yet at least. But it's part of a series of 10 or more stories Mike has done on the subject. And it's a series that's going to result in change, for the better, I believe. The story concerns the use of substandard materials used by TransCanada that contributed to a rupture within a few hundred meters of a hunting cabin owned by a Cree family in northern Alberta. It was only an act of God that saved multiple members of the Cree family, that they didn't wind up in a barbecue, a whistleblower told Mike. He said this incident shows that the public should be skeptical about trusting the National Energy Board to oversee safe pipeline operations, noting that they failed to enforce existing provisions of pipeline regulations that require companies to have adequate safety control programs, as well as safety codes that require materials to be resistant to fractures. National Observer was only launched a year ago, but today there are literally hundreds of stories like Mike's by him and other reporters that document uncomfortable truths like cancer-causing oil sands waste blowing in the wind, like poorly manufactured pipelines made by huge corporations that have put profits over people. And so, I say again, the media is absolutely fundamental to global change. Whether we are reporting on corporate corruption or government inaction or mass migrations from lands suffering from drought and famine and war, whether we are featuring exciting innovations happening with renewable energy, such as Suncor's new solar and wind farms in Alberta, the media is absolutely fundamental to people making healthy choices. The media provides society with knowledge and facts to come to terms with the predicament of climate change and how we will shift away from fossil fuels, from our addiction to them, from the way they are so intimately woven into our lives, perhaps the root cause of much that ails the world. And journalism will be absolutely fundamental to helping the public deal with that ever-present question that just won't go away, that gets more compelling as time goes on. What will become of us? What should we do? Thank you.